Welcome. I think what I want to do is talk about milk storage and handling while I wait for anyone to get on. And if no one gets on, then I just figure we will talk about milk storage. So I do have some videos on working and breastfeeding and pumping and thing, but I thought that I would talk about if you are just pumping at home on occasion. Maybe you're going to pump every day, but still it's not something you're doing necessarily for work, just for occasional separation. So anyway, I'm going to talk about that. If you do get on and you have a question, feel free to ask it, and I can stop what I'm talking about and answer any questions and then continue on. So until I see any, or if there are any that come, and talk about milk handling. So first, I am getting that I'm going to share with you is coming from the La Leche League, the Breastfeeding Answer book. And this is something that we carry as CLCs or IBCLCs whenever we're trying to assist moms with breastfeeding or in our education classes and so forth. So I am going to be looking down at is for 24 hours or 15 degrees Celsius. That's 24 hours that it can be at room temperature. And then the 66 to 72 degrees or 19 to 22 degrees Celsius is 10 hours. At 79 degrees or Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius is 4 to 6 hours. And then 86 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 to 38 degrees Celsius is 4 hours. So that's your room temperature. That's your room temperature, how, where you would want the temperature to be, where you would want the temperature to be in the house where you store it. So, and then it determines how long. So on average, you're talking 4 to 6 hours, but in a cooler environment, it can be as long as 24 hours, 10 hours. Again, it depends. And I will put this information in the description so that you guys can go back and look at it. And anybody that comes on, I see I have one on right now. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I am talking about milk storage, and I figure I would just talk about that as I wait for any questions that people might ask. And if you have a question, ask it, and I will stop what I'm talking about, answer your question, and then pick up where I left off. So I just want to make sure I mention that as people get on. So that was the room temperature. So now we're going to talk about milk storage in a refrigerator. And again, just for those of you that are coming on, I'm talking about milk storage basically for moms who are pumping at home. Not so much, I do have videos for moms who are working and breastfeeding, and I talk about milk storage and handling and that kind of thing. So this one is more for moms who are at home that are doing pumping occasionally, or pumping, you might be pumping every day, but it's for occasional separation. So say you're going out for a few hours, whatever, and so as soon as you have a baby and you begin to start pumping, it's good to build a milk supply in your freezer and your fridge, just so that you can have that to go to if there's an emergency or you want to go away or whatever the case. So that's what we're discussing today, is storing milk for those moms that are just pumping for those occasional separation times. All of this information is the same as working and breastfeeding, but I just didn't want to put the two together because I have videos on the working, and that's just like a whole separate, there's like other things that you would want to talk about when it comes to those. So we talked about the at-room temperature, and then we're going to talk about in a refrigerator. So if your fridge is 32 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit, or it's 0 to 4 degrees Celsius, it can be in the fridge for 8 days. Now again, this needs to be at the back of the fridge, not on the door of the fridge, and that can last up to 8 days. If on the 8th day or anytime between up to that 8th day. If you decide that you know you're not going to use that milk, you can stick it in the freezer. In the back of the freezer, it can last 6 months to a year. Again, I'll put this information below. If any of you that have gotten on, you have any questions, it doesn't have to be about milk storage. If you have questions for me, please let me know. I will stop what I'm talking about here to answer your question, and then I'll go back to the milk storage. I just figured if there are people that get on that have questions, I can answer them. If not, then I can talk about milk storage instead of just making a separate video on milk storage. I kind of like to do Q&As every now and then. So that's the refrigerator. And then in the freezer, it can last, if it's inside, if it's a freezer compartment inside a refrigerator, it can last up to 2 weeks. If it's a self-contained freezer unit of a refrigerator, so we're talking about like a little compartment of a freezer in a freezer inside of like a little fridge. But if we're talking about a big refrigerator that typically has one side freezer, one side fridge, or the top fridge, the bottom freezer, that can last 3 to 4 months, up to 6 months, even a year. But the year would be more likely in a deep freezer. So if you have a freezer that's separate than your fridge, usually those are a little bit colder. You can leave your milk frozen in those freezers for up to a year. Again, when you're storing your milk, always try to put the month, the date, and the year, and try to use your milk, you know, going from the oldest to the newest. So by date, putting the date on it, it kind of gives you an idea of when to use it. One thing I wanted to mention, and I believe I mentioned at the beginning, but I just wanted to mention it again, is that you can add fresh milk to freezer or cooled milk that you have already frozen or that you've already cooled in the fridge. You just would want to bring your fresh milk, you would want to cool your fresh milk down, because fresh milk is going to be at body temperature, whereas you know, you've got your other cooler milk or frozen milk, and we don't. So the way you would want to do it is cool the fresh milk down and then add it to your bottles. It's not something that you can't do. You can definitely do that. You can add fresh milk to previously pumped milk. Also, I'd mentioned thawing or freezing in 2 to 4 ounce increments. Usually from the beginning, baby starts about 2 ounces. They go to 2.5, they go to 3, and then probably around, it depends on the weight and the baby, but sometimes they can go up to 4 ounces. Some even will go more than that, but typically I would say I would start off your first month or two doing 3 ounce increments, and then you can up it to 4 ounces if you notice baby is taking more than that. But the nice thing about that is you can always pull out more milk and thaw it, but you don't want to have to throw away milk. We know how hard it is to pump, and so the last thing you want to do is toss milk. So if you do it in smaller increments, then you have less waste. So that's just kind of like a tip for moms who are pumping at home. Let's see. You can thaw under cool water and then warm running water. So if you're thawing frozen milk or you're trying to warm it quickly, when you use smaller quantities, you're able to thaw it quicker. So that's another benefit. Another thing I wanted to mention is the choice of your storage container. My recommendation has always been the milk storage bags, and getting the ones that are specific for milk storage, not necessarily the bags that are meant for bottle liner, you know, like for bottles, because those aren't necessarily made to freeze properly. If you are going to use those, you want to put them in another bag that is safe for breastfeeding. Hello. This is Sky Panta TV I'm seeing. Hello, welcome to the breastfeeding Q&A. As I've mentioned, I am doing a Q&A, but I am talking on milk storage. So while you're here, if you have a question that regarding anything, you can ask that question. I will stop what I'm talking about and answer your question. But I figured I would talk about milk storage today, either way. I'm sorry, I do not speak German. I don't know, there may be some translation services on YouTube in your area, but I do not speak German. I apologize. So again, you would want to try to find proper milk storage containers. You can use bottles, but then if you're going to use bottles, you have to make sure they're safe for freezing. And so the choices that they give, of course, number one would be glass, because it's less porous. So it again offers the best protection. And then the second choice would be a clear hard plastic, which is the polycarbonate. And then there's the third choice, which is the cloudy hard plastic, which is polypropylene. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but those are the three choices of containers. But like I said, I think it's easier to use the milk storage bags because it's easier to mark the date on them. They take up less space. They're easier to thaw, that kind of thing. So that's what I would recommend. You also, when you're storing, you want to leave like about an inch, or let me see, for centimeters, it would be 2.5 centimeters. You want to leave that at the top because you know, it will expand a little bit and you want to keep room for that so that it doesn't burst. So just as another little FYI. Let's see what else I wanted to talk about. So handling and thawing human milk is important. Knowing that the color of your milk can change, and also even the smell, but it can be a bluish, yellowish, or brownish in color. This is because of foods or dyes that can change the color of the milk. Also, if you have frozen milk, it can sometimes take on a yellowish color. This does not mean that it's spoiled or that it's sour. Usually you can tell by the smell if it's, you know, spoiled, but it's not that easy to spoil your milk. Breast milk, but then of course it's important to feel like it's safe. There are certain smells that your milk can take on. If you notice a soapy smell, that is normal. A lot of times that's just the because of the freezing of the milk. It can sometimes cause that little bit of a smell. Also, the human milk separates the cream from the milk. And so this is normal to see, like it kind of looks different. And so you might see like the fat sitting on top of the milk and then below it. So you just want to shake that up before you use it, just to kind of, you know, mix it up a little bit for the feeding. Like I mentioned before, you can combine batches of milk that are expressed at different times of the day or different days, as long as you cool your fresh milk, so that you're not adding hot milk to cold milk. It can also be added to frozen milk as long as you, I believe it says to cool for about 30 minutes your fresh milk. And then let's see, fresh milk can be added to frozen milk provided it is first cooled for about 30 minutes and there is less fresh milk than frozen milk. So say you have 2.5 ounces of frozen milk and you're adding an ounce of fresh milk, that's fine. You don't want to add necessarily 4 ounces of fresh milk to 1 ounce or 2 ounces of frozen milk. That would be a little more off as far as consistency and stuff. So again, it can be done in the proper handling and storage. And if you go back and watch the video from the beginning, you'll see some of my tips and the things I mentioned about that. To thaw frozen milk is basically you could just run it under warm water. You can cool it. You can run it under cool water and then warm water. It just depends on how, just don't microwave. That's the one thing that we don't want to do. It can kill some of the good bacteria that you have in your milk, and also it can leave hot spots, so you don't want that to happen. You don't want to burn the baby's mouth. Okay, let me find, I believe that is it as far as storing. Again, I'm going to put this information down below, and hopefully that will answer any questions that you might have on milk storage. Again, if you have any questions about milk storage, please let me know. And those of you that are on, do you have any questions for me about breastfeeding that you would like me to answer? Like I said, it doesn't have to be about milk storage. It can be about anything. And I will try to answer that for you. So let's see. I want to make sure that I talked about all the things that I wanted to mention. I think that another thing is important when you are pumping is to have some pumping tips, and that will be on a video that I'm going to be putting up next, is just a few pumping tips that would help moms. That one will just be a regular video, not a Q&A. So if that is something that you're interested, you know that you're pumping, you want the best, like to be able to get the most out of that pumping experience, you know, you definitely would want to check that out. So you asked the question, oh, let's see, where did it go? You asked about the nursing strike. I didn't catch, and I can't find it. Oh, wait a minute, here we go. Any tips to break it? She nurses at night 1 to 2 times while sleeping. A lot of times it's very normal at that 3 to 4 month mark to experience a, she's 6 months old. Okay. Almost 3 months. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. She's 6 months and she's been on a 3-month nursing strike. I believe that's what you're asking me. So from 3 months old till 6 months, she's only nursing at night. Is that what you're mentioning to me? As far as a nursing strike goes, there are a lot of different, there are a lot of different reasons for a strike. Sometimes they're teething, which is very common from 3 to 6 months, and it hurts to suck a certain way. And a lot of times the reason they'll sleep at night is because they're less awake, so they kind of aren't really thinking about it. So what I would suggest is you can try like numbing the gums a little bit. Some will use like a cold washcloth, whatever way that you use to kind of cool down and numb that area. Some use oils, just whatever you might specifically know of that's safe to use. I used to use the baby Orajel. I think some people are like totally against that. But like I said, I've heard people rub, I think it's thieves oil on the gums. There's different things you can do. Anyway, you can try to nurse that way. I would say nursing when right after a nap, like when they're just waking up. Again, that can sometimes help. Sometimes if there's something that they are relating, some type of event that they're pairing the breastfeeding with. So if breastfeeding has been challenging at all, or the baby has been struggling in any area, they can sometimes, what's the word? They think it's something to do with the breastfeeding. You know how if we have a certain event in life that seems to pair up with another tragic event, and it's like a song, for instance. If something happens and you're in a car accident and you're listening to a certain song, after that song kind of brings up bad feelings or whatever. Sometimes there can be little things that can cause that with breastfeeding. So trying to do things, maybe breastfeed in an area that they're most comfortable. But what I'm thinking it might be for you in the case, because it's 3 to 6 months, that's a very high teething time. and that gets very sore. Sometimes ear infections can cause pain, and if they attribute breastfeeding with pain, then that may make them kind of be adverse to that. So when I'm finished with the Q&A today, I will put some information below on nursing strikes and different things that you can do, so you can check out more information, and then I can maybe look up a little bit more for you. With 3 months, like I said, I really think it might have to do with teething. If she's 6 months old now, it is actually very normal for a baby to stop nursing as much at 6 months, because now they're going to start getting solid foods. I'm not sure when you introduced solids for your baby or if you have yet, but a baby who starts to get solid foods will begin to wean themselves from breastfeeding, because their breastfeeding becomes the supplement, solids become the main nutrition. So I hope that answers your question or helps a little bit. Hopefully that answers some. You said that she nurses at night, so that's a good sign. I know with my daughter, she would only nurse at night and first thing in the morning. I couldn't get her to do during the day as well. She did a nursing strike, but I was able to continue first thing in the morning and at night. So you can try. I always offer it during the day, always offer. But now that she's older, like I said, she's not going to be, most likely not going to be nursing as much anyway. And you will notice a drop in your milk supply around 6 months due to the fact that it's actually normal for baby to start eating solids and drinking less milk at that point. So I was talking about milk storage and pumping tips. So look out for that video. Because I think it's important as a mom to kind of know some tips that help with pumping. I'll just give you one in particular, and that's having a picture of the baby in front of you when you're pumping, or listening to your baby's coos or cries can help with that milk letdown, because you're trying to help get that milk to let down. So that's also important. So hopefully that answered some questions. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask me while we're still on? Because I definitely want to be able to answer any questions you guys have if you're on here. I don't want it to have to be just about what I want to talk about. So if you have any more questions, feel free to ask them. And while I'm kind of waiting to see if anyone else has any more questions, I am going to look up the nursing strike for you and see if I can find any information to share with you. I think it was... so I don't think I mentioned, for anybody who's new that's on, I am getting my information as a certified lactation counselor. We usually use the Breastfeeding Answer Book from La Leche League to help moms when we are talking with them with any concerns that they have. So a lot of the information that I talk with you guys on is from my Breastfeeding Answer Book. And of course, the things that we're taught. Always when you're looking up information or trying to find answers to something, always look for dates. So if you're looking at something, you get like so many different opinions. So when you're looking up something, make sure that it's the newest date. So if you're looking at something that's in 2005 and you're reading something that's in 2010, then the 2010 would trump the 2005. The other thing is always look for reputable sites, not necessarily mom sites. You want to look for .org or .gov sites, or reputable, like La Leche League, IBCLE. KellyMom.com is a really good reputable site. And if you're pumping, Medela is a good site that has some good pumping tips. So that's a reasonable site to go on for not necessarily breastfeeding, but for pumping. For breastfeeding, like I said, you want to go somewhere where you see like that's health related. CDC is a government website, but it's on health and what's best for health. World Health Organization is another one. UNICEF, which is UNICEF. That's another good website to check out. So those are good websites to look up and check when you have questions. So make sure that you're looking at where you're finding your information and the year that it's written, because things that come out, like the milk storage, from 20 years ago is different from today, because they're constantly researching and learning new things about breast milk. And so it's important to kind of keep up to date with it, and not going based on what we were told, 20 years ago. When my when I was having babies, things have changed, from like my first baby, and then my sisters had babies before I did, so their kids were all like 10 years old and older when I started having my kids. So the information that they were taught, was different. Even not everything, but there are like certain things that are different. Okay, let me find here on nursing strikes. Weaning versus a nurse strike. So kind of to know the difference. So when it's before a year, it's most likely a nursing strike and not weaning naturally. Usually weaning naturally occurs over a period of weeks or months. And when a child abruptly stops nursing after they've been nursing many times a day, this is most likely a nursing strike, no matter what the child's age is. Unlike a child who weans naturally, a child on a nursing strike is unhappy about the situation. So they're not necessarily happy about that. All right, now it tells me to look up breast refusal. Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to mention them and I will answer them. Until then, I'm just going to kind of look up some information for the mom here who had questions about nursing strike. So I'm going to just look up to see if I can help a little further. I always, like to answer, really be able to be helpful. So sometimes the questions, when I can't really answer them, it's kind of hard. Okay, so here's some questions to ask you regarding a nursing strike. So this is questions that the book would tell me to ask you as a mom. So what the baby age was and how long have they been fussy or refusing the breast, which you already mentioned. Has the baby or was the baby being given bottles during that time period? So prior to that 3 months, were they given bottles and then all of a sudden that changed and now they were given bottles? Or were they, always given bottles and were fine with it, but then all of a sudden now the baby's choosing, is not wanting the breast? So bottles are important if they've had any bottles. Also, if there's been any health problems between mom or baby. So I'd mentioned the teething, but also I'd mention ear infections, anything that could cause pain for the baby while they're breastfeeding, and also any issues that you might have had. Okay, so you went back to work at 3 months. Yeah, so that's probably the biggest thing right there. With my experience, where my daughter also went on a nursing strike. She was 8 months though when she did. I also went back to work at 3 months. It's hard when we start to use bottles because they do prefer bottles, the ease of bottles. So especially when they can start moving around, now they can take a bottle and, go explore versus, having to just strictly, be at the breast. Another thing that's important is when you are bottle feeding, if you can make the flow of the bottle slower and mimic it as much as possible to breastfeeding, and this can be hard to do when you're at work because someone else is feeding the baby, but if you can teach that person how to do it, sometimes that can help, because a lot of times babies prefer the bottle because it's faster, it comes out faster, there's a lot less work to feeding from a bottle versus breastfeeding. So if you have a bottle, and I don't have one to show you, but say this is a bottle. If you hold the bottle at this angle rather than this angle, what happens is you want to just put milk at the tip of the nipple. So just in the nipple itself, put a little in there and hold it there and let the baby suck it, and then let them rest. You add a little bit more, because that's how breastfeeding feeding works. The baby sucks a little bit, then they rest for a minute, they suck some more, they rest for a minute. And so a lot of people worry, okay, well, what about air? When you're using a bottle, they're gonna get air no matter what. So what we're trying to do is make sure the baby stays on the breast as well as the bottle. Because we don't have a choice, right? We're working. So when you hold the bottle this way, there's two things that benefit. Number one, you can put them back to the breast. They're less likely to choose the bottle over the breast. Also, you're less likely to overfeed them, because when you're holding it this way and only the tip of the nipple is got milk, they suck it, then you put a little bit more in. It's a slower pace. So think about with us when we eat, if we have a huge plate full of whatever we're eating and we eat slow, we're less likely to eat the whole, everything on that plate. But if we eat fast before 15 minutes, we've, basically gulped that food in 5 minutes, we don't even feel like we're full. We don't feel the fullness or the fact that we overate until like 15, 20 minutes later. Then we're like, oh my goodness. Well, that's the same with the baby. If you feed them at a slower pace, they eat less. But if you feed them, with the bottle up like this, then they are going to feed a lot faster, and they can empty that bottle and then overfeed and not realize they've stuffed themselves. Then their stomach expands, they begin to need more and more milk. So by holding the bottle, it's called baby-led or paced feeding. So you're basically pacing that feed so that the baby continues to eat at a slower pace, and then it mimics the breast. So if that is easier to understand, hopefully you understand what I mean. I will put some information about paced bottle feeding below for you as well, just so you can check that out, because that's probably right there your number one biggest thing is you went back to work. Like I said, with each one of my kids, I had to do that. I didn't know anything about paced bottle feeding at the time because I was not a breastfeeding specialist. Now I've learned all these tricks. If only I could have another baby and, be able to do it the right way. But that still being the case, you could do everything right and still, have a baby that chooses the bottle over the breast, because not only is it faster, but like I said, they can have the freedom of looking around, moving around, that kind of thing. So that's probably more likely the case that you went back to work and you introduced bottles. Let me look and see if there's anything else. Whether or not you or the baby are taking medication, sometimes medications can change the taste of the milk. So sometimes that can be why. If you started something, say you were drinking you weren't drinking coffee or tea prior to that 3 months, and you started drinking it and there's something in it that they don't like the taste of, it changes the taste of the milk. That can also cause a nursing strike. If you've had breast surgery, if your nipples are sore or your breast is engorged, which means they're not actually getting a proper milk transfer. Again, I don't think these are a problem for you, because it sounds like it may be just the fact that you went back to work and you had to introduce bottles. There's really nothing you could have done about that. And then also, what point does the baby become fussy? Right away? So another thing that's different that you can also try is that when a baby is bottle fed, milk comes instantly. But when you breastfeed, it takes a few minutes for your milk to let down, so the milk isn't just there. And so that little time period could frustrate a baby enough that they refuse the breast. So if you can pump or hand express to the point where you feel your milk let down and you know the milk is there now, and then put the baby on, they're less likely to feed. So if she gets on and the milk is there right away, you may not deal with the fussiness. But if she gets on and the milk is not there right away, then they just refuse it. So that's another trick that you can try is hand expression, or just getting enough milk out, or pumping it long enough or hand expressing long enough to get your milk to let down and the milk is now coming out. Does the mother touch the baby's face or head during feeding? So sometimes when we touch their face or their head, it can distract a baby, but this is more for a younger baby versus an older baby. So I don't think that would apply for you. So the tips that I mentioned about, I think it probably does have to do with bottle, so you can try some of those different things that we talked about. So hopefully that answered. And like I said, I'll put some information in the description once I post this video. Some more questions is, does the baby choke or pull away from the breast? How long does a mother breastfeed on each breast? How many times a day do you breastfeed? Can the baby extend their tongue past their lower gum? Does the baby arch their back during feedings? Is the baby fussy when they're not breastfeeding? And if so, how much of the day are they fussy? How would you describe your baby in general? Are they very relaxed, very strong, very active? And then, has your baby recently had an injury or an injection? Does he have sores or white patches in his mouth? And then if the baby is older than 2 weeks, so that was more of like younger, no, well, some of it was younger. Have you started using a new product on or near your breasts or your clothing? Have you been under unusual stress lately, or changes in the household or baby's routine? Right there would be work related. And then, is the baby drooling much more than usual? That would be a sign of teething. So it sounds to me, asking these questions, reading these questions, and just from what you've mentioned before, that it probably is does have to do with you returning to work and having to introduce a bottle. But the fact that she still breastfeeds at night is a really good thing. And if, like I said, if you could start pacing the bottle feeds, you might find that she'll breastfeed other times of the day as well. So since no one else has any more questions, I am going to go ahead and end for today. You're welcome. I think it's Perrine. You're welcome. I am glad that I could answer the question. And like I said, I'll try to put more information below. Thank you guys for watching today. And if you aren't subscribed to my channel, make sure that you do hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you're notified when I do put out videos. I don't put them out every week, but I try to be consistent enough, at least once or twice a month, if not more than that. I try to do more, and I'm trying to do more Q&As. So hopefully I can continue to do that. So thank you guys for watching, again, for coming on and asking questions, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. You guys have a great day.